We're back.
We're back.
We are back.
100x leader. This is the change equation.
Yep.
Is what we're going to be discussing.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking dissatisfaction,
Oh, he's done his homework, hasn't he?
vision,
Yeah, he always
and
does.
then our natural steps. Yeah.
What have you taken from this one then?
I think looking at this one, especially when you look at something that you're dissatisfied with, I think it gets you to this exercise makes you look at the root causes and the issues and what's your next steps moving forward. Because obviously, if we don't change anything and we don't look at it, it'll stay the same.
Stay the same. I like that. What would you say, Dean? Because when I was doing this piece of training, it got me thinking to the early days when we first started doing a lot of projects together.
Yeah.
And we used to talk about change quite a lot. What have you took from it?
Yeah, basically what Paul said, I think sometimes we get comfortable with the status quo. When we start to really dig deep and challenge it, you can find dissatisfaction, not amongst just one or two people, but across your team. And it's how you dig deep and fix them problems, really.
I love it. So for people listening and thinking, what on earth are they on about? So the change equation is
D.
times V
Yeah.
times
And
equals resistance, isn't it?
it certainly does, yeah. And I think that's what I've just touched on. So dissatisfaction
Is the D.
times V for vision times N for natural next steps equals resistance. And it's something that personally I've really looked at this really hard because I've had personal things that I've been dissatisfied with for years, but I've never really took steps. I have, but I haven't been accountable for them steps and I haven't put processes in place until now.
Yeah, and I think what happens is, though, like this, I'm a huge believer in what's the next step.
Yeah.
Nightmare thing. We can be loads of things going wrong, but it's always about what is it we can physically do.
Yeah.
You know, what controllables. We talk about this in mental health, don't we? A lot of the times. Sometimes within mental health, we talk about hypothetical worries and practical worries. Have you ever heard of that, Dean, before?
Yeah.
And I think the challenge is, even though we can get dissatisfied, we might not sometimes see the vision. We were talking about this morning, actually, in terms of a challenge might happen in the business. But sometimes you might look at a problem, whereas I might look at it. You might look at it as a problem, I might look at it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Neither of us are wrong.
Yeah.
It's just looking at that together, but then actually using a framework like this to say what are the next steps in it.
Yeah, totally get that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this. And yeah, when I first looked at this exercise, I've put some things in place moving forward. So it's all good.
Good. So why don't you kick off? Let's start with a question. You got a question for me?
So what can the change equation do to help us identify the right changes?
It's a great question. Like you've done a bit of homework there, Paul.
I have been studying this. I've enjoyed this subject.
So on that, what I would say is I think it's simple, a real simple framework in that the challenge with change, sometimes I've done a leadership degree and they talk about change for different modules and they're speaking another language what you can't relate to anybody. Trying to instill that, I think what I really love about this is it's really simple. Don't need a degree to understand it, is what I would say. What would you say, Dean?
Yeah, I remember, like I say, if we're going back years when you first came into the business and you told me, this is where I want the business to be in 10 years. And I'm using a business as an example. It can be, and I was like, straight away, panic mode, how are we going to get there? And thinking, Leon wants to jump from here to here. But what I needed to understand myself in order to get there was, what are we'll talk about the next natural steps. How are we going to get there? Is it a clear path? Is it documented? Where do I fit in? How do I how do I get involved in that? And I think for me, one of the takeaways on this is sometimes we have these visions of what we want to achieve. Sometimes we don't communicate it clearly to the right people.
Effectively, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and put them processes in place that it is clear.
Yeah.
And it's easy to understand.
Yeah. And
even though sometimes it is a complex subject, in it.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is like anything in life, isn't it? Is change is and I think the pandemic's shown this, change is the constant. Prior to the pandemic, I used to always say change is the constant because for me, I believe we're either growing or we're dying.
Yeah.
You know, we've got to be constantly evolving, constantly learning because we can't stand still. And I think the pandemic's got everyone else on the same page.
Yeah.
Would we agree, disagree?
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I think during the pandemic, especially, people's had to evolve. People's had to change because, like you said, you either living or you're dying, especially in business. If you didn't evolve in business, you would have died.
Yeah.
And that's simple.
But I think where it becomes more challenging, and I think why tools like this become really good, is we've now got teams. You mentioned a great point about communicating and collaborating and making sure that it is communicated. I think that's going to get even harder for businesses because traditionally, it used to be a business model where we all worked together within the business. And let's take you, for example. Today, you're representing who today?
I'm representing Andy's Man Club today,
Which we always do anyway.
which we always do anyway, yeah.
But formally, today, you are working as that part of Andy's Man Club.
Yeah, today I give a certain part of my calendar out each and every week to Andy's Man Club, and we're doing this leadership training through Andy's Man Club, and I thought, why not jump on board and record it as well?
Exactly.
Which is great.
So we're doing what we call no extra time. So
Exactly.
today, you had to do your leadership training, which
Yep.
happens to be giant, process we put in. But again, that again is using tools to manage change within the organisation. But if you look at yourself, and your class is a hybrid stroke remote worker for Andy's Man Club.
Yep.
Because you're fixed, you don't technically have a fixable, you don't really go into the head office. You do, but it's more ad hoc, mainly to get you on the same page or on the vision. Is that fair?
Yeah, the same vision as I go to head office once, twice a month, maybe once every 2 months. And it's just to touch base with every single person. We do have communication and we do have processes in place that we can communicate with each other. But I always believe there's nothing like meeting everybody in person and then just touching base and just ticking a few boxes and making sure our vision and the way we're going is all the same.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, no, this is it. And I think that maps into this equation, doesn't it? D times V times N. It's like we had a problem last week on the help desk, and there was some problems with things not being followed properly. We all had an agreed path, really, of how we was going to fix this issue. And that's where this framework came in and helped, because we need to challenge, like we mentioned before, is challenge the status quo, find out what's wrong. We then need to make sure that we're all on the same path to get towards that vision. But obviously, in order to get to that vision, the next steps have to be really clear. Everybody's on board. And we've used this framework, like I said, last week at a meeting. It seemed to be transformational, really.
I love it. Love it. So, you got any other questions?
No, just going back to the vision part, I think the Andy's Man Club, I've been involved with Andy's Man Club now for 6.5 years, and our vision's been very clear, very simple, and it's communicated very well. And I think sometimes when we start changing certain things and we're not on the same path, that's when it becomes complicated. When everybody's on the same path and the vision's set, it's very clear.
Yeah, but I think where it can become a challenge. So, for example, it was me who said that we're going to move off WhatsApp onto a corporate business tool.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people who was dissatisfied with that in the groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've seen it?
I've seen it, yeah.
I mean, on that, like for obviously like yourself, Leo, everybody in the room, but for leaders out there, I mean, question to you guys, I'm happy to jump in on this as well. I've done a bit of work, but what steps should like a leader take to ensure that the team is prepared for change?
I think that's great where I was going to head with that. I think making sure you invest the time to communicate the change.
Yeah.
That would be my first port of call. And jumping back into making sure that we have structured formal time, because quite easy as leaders, we can do what we call a drive-by. And for anyone not understand what a drive-by is, that's where your boss or a leader just walked up to you and says, while you're doing this, bang. And I can be a nightmare for doing that. I've worked really hard to put things in place where I book formal time in calendars with people, communicate it. I use language like I'm provisionally thinking about this, provisional plan promise, another simple tool people can use, because sometimes when a leader says something, it's naturally taken for granted that we're going to do it, when actually you might just be provisionally planning to do that. You aren't promised that you're actually going to do that. So mine would be really taking a look at setting informal time, which needs to be done. Yeah, that might be around the coffee machine, or on the water cooler, just for seeking a little bit of feedback. That's always a good one. And really developing change, making sure that you are getting people on board, and you can do things like the 4 helpful list. Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, so we've run the 4 helpful list, haven't we? So we run it across the organisation, and it's finding out what's right in the organisation collectively, what's wrong in the organisation. And this, sometimes we do this, it can be anonymous. We state that, so we give a form out. It can be anonymous if people wish. Sometimes you find that they're a bit more honest if it's anonymous, so they can express whatever they like. We've got what would we change in the organisation?
What's missing? Yeah,
what's missing? Is that right?
So that's what I interrupted you, Flo. I said what's wrong, what's missing, and what's confused.
Yeah, what's confused? That was it. Yeah, so we run that once a year, don't we?
We run it once a quarter. We run it once a year where we come together as a team.
Yeah.
And then once a quarter, depending on different departments, we might go run that exercise. And I think it's really interesting. I help out on the suicide prevention board, don't I?
Yeah.
I was mentioning to you, I chaired a meeting the other week, and it was a really interesting day the other week. I'd gone in with an organisation in the morning, helping sort out the digital technology and how they could transform using technology across their organisation. And I go to a suicide prevention meeting, and the one commonality that I used was we had formal time in both areas, a set time, and I used the 4 helpful lists to basically say across all of it, what's right, what we're doing right, what's wrong, what's confused, and what's missing. And when you look at that, what's right, what we're looking for is there any ways that we can optimize what's right and make it better? Can we automate that process? What's wrong? What can we change? Is there something we can change to stop it being wrong? What's confused? Is there something we can clarify to make it not confused anymore? And what's missing? Is there something we can add? And when you look at that, both two complete different challenges. One's about saving life, and one's an organisation that's trying to make sure it's a charitable organisation I was working with, actually. And again, resources are a huge problem. And both of them, what the commonalities between them all is there was a lot of people who was confused, but there was processes there that people know about.
Yeah.
So it's clarifying them, making them available. So I think that's some steps that I would say as a leader. What would you want to add to that, Dean?
Yeah, I think that's it. Like you said, if we do sometimes in the past where we've had quick drive-by meetings where if we're trying to enforce change and collectively get people on board with it, you find the best sort of process to help with that is formal or informal time, which you're just dedicating yourself to that one person, just to make sure that you're mapping out the next steps, that you're providing adequate resources if they need them. And the other thing is, do they understand what you're communicating? You need to get that response back from them to make sure that they fully understand what you're communicating and that it's clear. Because if you don't, and like Leon said, if it is just a drive-by of whilst I'm doing a job, you get dumped another 3-4 things that you need to do to help to get where you need to be. It's not mapped out properly. It's not clear. It'll never get done.
I also think a few years back, in my last life as a production manager, I had to bring a new system in for quality control and the process, how the product went through the factory, and I had to completely change everything. And the first thing I did was have meetings with all the people involved, told them what I was challenged with and how could they help and how could we assist and how could we make things better. And the feedback I got was absolutely brilliant from the people and I think I was the first person actually ever to get the people on the factory floor actually involved in helping.
Yeah.
And it made it so easy. It took quite a long while to put it in, but it was so easy because we got the pay. Everybody was bought into it because they felt part of it.
Yeah, and that was a key bit. And that takes me nicely where our question I wanted to ask on this is, what can we use to measure the success of a change in initiative? What do you guys think we could do to measure that?
We have some tools though. We've got some CSAT scores that we use, which are...
Explain that to someone.
So it's like a customer satisfaction survey that goes out after every completed ticket we've finished for a customer. It's basically like a feedback survey, and it gives the customer gives them a chance to give us some feedback on how we performed on that particular task. They're worth the weight in gold, to be honest, because the bad feedback is just as good as the good. And the reason we say that, we thrive on the bad feedback because it's our chance to shine. We need to find out what went wrong and what we can do to improve and what we can do to fix things. Similar to what you do with your courses.
I totally agree with you, Dean, because after every course that I deliver, I give them a feedback form and I ask them if they take 2 minutes at the end of every course just to fill the feedback form in, because you get quite a lot of really good feedback, but the ones that stick in my mind are sometimes the ones that are constructive, because I always say that's what makes your course better, is because if I can enhance the next person's experience by just making it a little bit better, and I think that it's invalid. So the ones that are constructive and give you a little bit of fact, they stick in my mind more than the actual really good ones.
Yeah, I think like you always say, Leon, there's always some truth in a negative feedback. It's just what it extracts from it.
I take credit for it. It was I always remember listening to a podcast from, I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary Vee, and some people love him, some people don't like him. And what he said is, as a human race, we've got to start getting comfortable with negative feedback, because there's always an element of truth in that negativity. Now, I think there's always the way feedback's delivered. Sometimes it can be delivered. Sometimes people don't have the time to invest in feedback, and it can be quite hard at times. A number of times I've put all my life and soul into a process. I've communicated it, and it's been wrong. It's just been wrong. It hasn't been delivered. It's not landed properly. It's not been right. But if you use frameworks like I mentioned, what was wrong with it. There must have been something right about it in the first place. What was confused, what was missing.
Yeah.
Use simple frameworks like that. You can then try to build it, because for me, feedback is like gold.
Yeah.
But it's having the resilience to get your ego out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as well over the last few years you've taught me that by not taking things personal, because you used to, you
Yeah.
put your heart and soul
Give
in.
me an example.
I did a 3 to 5 year plan, didn't I, to you and Scott, and delivered it, and I thought it was brilliant. And then, no, it's right though. And then I came out, and there was some constructive criticism there that you thought this could be a lot better, and made it a lot better.
Yep.
And I remember one of my first courses that I created myself from scratch was my Line Manager's Masterclass. Probably one of my best sellers now, and probably one of the best courses that I deliver. But I remember presenting it to you for the first time, and you went, no, don't look right. It's not your branding. Just things like that. The content was there. Looks amazing now. And that was just from, and before I'd have gone away thinking, but I don't. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I scheduled 2 days to build that course, and it ended up taking me 5. But it's the best 5 days that I've spent in years.
Yeah, I like that. No, it's same for us. And you've got to, like Leon said, you've got to get your ego out of the way. Nobody likes bad feedback, and if you take it personally, then you're never really going to adopt it and see the positive side of things. One of my responsibilities here is, if we get negative feedback, I call a customer and ask why they give us that feedback and find out a little bit more about it. Then we develop simple processes basically and put things in place to prevent it happening again. Like I say, it's these little tiny 1% changes that make us better each day.
Yeah, and I think
I love that.
other bits in that, ways you can measure it, I think use common languages as well. So again, a big organisation I was working in the other week, they mentioned that they've got multiple divisions doing loads of different stuff. I'd asked them if they did feedback, and they took feedback from customer satisfaction surveys. They never did the Net Promoter one.
Yeah.
And I said, what would it mean to the business if you just brought a Net Promoter score in? A Net Promoter, do you know what it is, Paul?
No.
So a Net Promoter score is a real simple question. It basically asks, how likely on a scale of 1 to 10 are you to recommend us to someone?
Yep.
Really simple. And what the science sort of says behind that is, if you're scoring an 8 to a 10, they're a promoter. If they're a 7 to a 5, the class is negative. Not negative, that's the wrong word. Impartial, they're like on the fence.
Yeah.
They're not promoting you, but they're not detracting from you. So they're impartial, that's
Yep.
the word, sorry, impartial,
Yep,
not negative. And 5 and below, the class as a detractor. They're not happy with your service, and they'll quite frankly be telling people they're not happy with the service.
Yep.
So it gives you a real quick barometer to ask a real simple question, really easy to answer that question on a scale, and then you can put processes in place. So anything like an 8 to a 10, you want to be booking a one-to-one with them people and asking for referrals. It can bring
Yep.
business into the business. More
Yep.
business. Anything below that, you want to be asking the for lists. What's right, what's wrong, what can we do to change it, and you want to be developing your service around them people, because we can be moving the needle to get them up to an 8 or a 9.
Yep.
And lower down, again, we want to focus on them because they've obviously not felt loved. Something's gone wrong in the system or the process, and it gives you a lot higher view than a customer satisfaction. A customer satisfaction, and it's a challenge for us, is it only gives you a snapshot in time at that particular thing that you fixed. So for us, it's really important that we track them 2 different things, because we might be working with a lot of stakeholders who are like end users, but the leadership and management team might not really interact with them on a day-to-day basis because they might not be using the same systems,
Yeah.
the same processes. So if we're not tracking how likely the leadership team are likely to promote us, it might be because the rest of the team might not be communicating the actual work that we're doing. Things
Yeah.
like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And it's just, we've got like that at the minute, haven't we? We've chucked in some great technology. We get some great feedback from some departments, and we get some maybe not so good feedback from other departments. But from that top level, that's where we need to see the true feedback of what these business owners and these managers, they might be getting negative feedback, which could be from their own internal staff. They might be reporting things back which are good or bad, but we never get that direct, or we never did used to get that direct feedback from the top.
Before doing the Net Promoter Score, but
Yeah.
it might be as simple as back to this vision. As a lot of the times, because we're responsible for changing tech sometimes the full vision might not have been communicated effectively across the organisation, and that's not because the organisation's done a bad job. Some of these organisations have multiple new starters, new people come into roles. When someone new joins an organisation, they've always done it a set way, and we might be perceived as being like the change agents, if you like, and we're putting barriers in, especially. I suppose the best area to speak about is security for us, because we're locking systems down. It can be perceived, if the vision's not being communicated while we're doing that we're actually a hindrance to the organisation.
Yeah, you're not helping.
We're putting barriers in
totally
the way.
Get it. Yeah,
We could be seen as we're stopping them doing
their tasks and doing their work because you're putting blocks in place.
Yeah, and that's how it can be perceived at times. So it's making sure that we're getting the most effective feedback we can from the right departments and teams.
Yeah, get that, like that.
Any more questions? Or got any more on here? Can you think about else?
No, I've loved this one. Like you say, process, make it simple, make it relevant, make it easy to follow. I've just loved it.
I've got one more I can slip
Go on.
in
Go on then.
if we've got time for one, have we?
Go on.
Yeah. So how can we manage the best expectations of the stakeholders during times of change? So what can we do effectively to engage the stakeholders during the times of these changes?
I think we've talked a lot about this already as well. You talked about your clear vision.
Yeah.
Make it simple, make it concise.
Yeah.
The buy-in from everybody. What else?
I'll help you out. I think we've got to have some simple KPIs to measure it, because what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
And I think something as simple as, let's take an example. Our business, we originally wasn't booking all of our times to customers,
No.
to projects and other bits, and that was a lot of the time because we're quite a small team, so we knew.
Yeah.
But that didn't give us a right insight into. We need to make sure that we was, one, profitable on each customer account. If you're not profitable, there's no point in running that account, because we're going to go out of business. And two, we're also effective in what we was doing. It's all right as booking the right time to it, but back to the customer satisfaction scores, we might be putting all the right time to it, but if they're not happy, there's something we're doing wrong within that process.
Yeah.
So for us, I think there's two parts into it. You're saying manage expectations.
Yeah.
I think the other side is, how can we measure the success of a change in incentive? So for us, we set a KPI that all the hours, I think, is it percentage of hours? Is it like 36? We wanted 36 hours booked into it. The other time gets booked to training. So another example of change our business is everyone must do 2 hours worth. If you think about what we've put at Man Club, you're doing your giant training.
Yeah.
Which an hour of it was today. That's on a KPI.
Yeah.
So for me, I think we've got to make it a bit like a SMART goal.
Yeah.
Specific, measurable, attainable, relatable, and time bound. And I think that comes with simple KPIs. And I also think about making sure that we document stuff. So here's an example. We're driving change around our onboarding process and what good looks like.
Yeah.
We have a quarterly meeting on it with all the different departments. And what happened in that meeting, Dean? So we had a massive meeting, didn't we? Went through it all.
Yeah.
And I asked them at the end, I was taking notes. And what did I ask at the end of that meeting?
Yeah, so Leon asked a question about a particular process, a step, and one of the team members communicated back, well, no, actually, we don't do it. So you was basically clarifying what we'd just gone for the full meeting.
So I verified it, clarified it, wrote it down.
You had it all in your steps, didn't you? So then Leon, right, okay, so let's just agree, these are the next steps, this is what we've agreed.
This is what these are my version of events from this meeting today. And I'm going to just, before we close the meeting off, I'm going to go back and say, this are the steps of what we've agreed. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, and somebody said, no, you're wrong, but they'd not made their own steps correct. Everybody else in the room was on the same page as Leon. But again, it just goes to show like this clear, the vision and the steps involved. At the end of that meeting, we could have all walked out going, oh yeah, great meeting, well done. Because Leon clarified it, there was a step there what somebody had missed. And that could have thrown the full work we'd done. It could have just thrown it all off.
For me, on that though, is what my advice would be is make sure you verify and clarify everything.
Yeah.
And you document it. It has to be documented, because if it's not documented, if we can't explain it on a piece of paper, we can't do it. And that example there was multiple individuals adding to that process in there. I didn't know if that process was right or wrong. I just documented what I'd heard, and I might have documented some steps of it wrong. So I think my feedback would be,
so you clarified it at the end.
Verified it, and then the team clarified it. So we actually had it documented, and then when the minutes went out, everyone was on the same page. Whereas what I've found previously is I'd have documented it for speed. I wouldn't have had that last question, because I might have left that meeting. I might have documented it, and then what I might have done is, well, that's what you said, and we could have got into a tit for tat. Whereas I always find it's a lot easier if we verify and we clarify. And I'd recommend doing that before you send any emails out as well, especially around change. How many times have we agreed something, put it in an email, and someone's took offence to the way that's said. Whereas I like to verify, clarify, and say, I'm going to send an email. This is how I'm going to send it. Can you just clarify back to me? You've understood that exactly the same, and then look to send it. That is what I would say.
Yeah, we've done that before.
Yeah, that's a great point. That because we have had that numerous times in the past, and it's a really simple tweaking it, your process. But no, I've loved this one.
Yeah, I have. Very good. I've enjoyed it, and Dean's been on the ball again.
So what's your one take on as we time off?
Man is find out what you're dissatisfied with, have a clear vision, and then put your next steps in.
Yeah, same for me. So it's like, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. If there's anything you are dissatisfied about, challenge it, but make sure that it's connected to the vision, and make sure that the vision has clear steps of how to get there.
Mine would be, for anyone listening, it sounds real complicated what we're talking here, but find a great group of people who support and challenge you, and making change and driving change will be easy. And you need a team of different thinkers around you, because what's different to one person is different to another. So I think mine would be, make sure you've got a diverse group of people who are prepared to challenge each other, would be my advice.
Yeah.
So that's Leon checking out.
Paul checking out.
Dean, check it out.
Welcome to The Hack, the straight-talking smart tech podcast where we discuss the ever-changing world we live in today. It's time to start thinking differently. So tune in and buckle up for some home truths as Hull and East Yorkshire's very own digital tech experts talk transformation and change, focusing on people, process and technology.